Hello, and thanks again for joining us for this Labor Day edition of Alaska Weather, 5th day of September 2022. First graphic up today, high wind watch out for the southern panhandle. Expecting southeast winds of 25 to 35 miles an hour with gusts up to 60 miles per hour. There from Dixon Entrance to Cape Decision, coastal areas, so the western part of the Prince of Wales Island area there, including Heidelberg, Craig, and Klawock. And that's out for Tuesday morning through Tuesday afternoon. Just a watch now as opposed to a warning, which means it's imminent or occurring. This is forecast for tomorrow during the day. And could see damaging winds, could blow down trees, power lines with power outages are all possible with this. Again, gusts 60 miles an hour, so or 50 to 60 miles per hour. And travel could be difficult, especially for high-profile vehicles. And from there, moving on, still have the flood advisory for Snow Glacier Dammed Lake releasing. Flooding caused by a glacier dammed lake outburst is expected. And Snow River, Kenai Lake, and the Kenai River from Kenai Lake to Skilac Lake is where any flooding would occur. And again, it's an advisory and not a warning. And this is out until 2:30 p.m. Thursday afternoon. And the impacts would be Primrose Campground, as you can see on the chart there, the highlighted mapped area. The road may become impassable for small vehicles. And then the Sterling Highway residences, same as yesterday, from milepost 48 to 50, could see water in their yards. And Cooper Landing boat launch could become submerged. You know, it's all could be, possibly. Not imminent, but potential flooding of Quartz Creek boat ramp and adjacent campsites also could occur. And the next shot here showing a picture of the lake and the ice levels there showing, or the ice on the lake water. You can see the glacier farther in the background there, but showing the water level of the lake, and there's still plenty of water there to flow out or to come through the dam there. So that's why it's out through Thursday afternoon. And from there, looking at satellite imagery, you can see some good clearing took place over south central Alaska today. Kenai Peninsula right up into Madanuska, Susitna Valley, Anchorage area, as well as Prince William Sound. And some sunshine over Kodiak Island as well, there, especially on the southwest side of the island. And that allowed temperatures to get up into the lower to mid 60s from the Kenai Peninsula on up into the southern Madanuska Valley, or into the Madanuska Valley and the southern Susitna Valley. Also, another good area of clear skies occurred in the about the Koyukuk Valley there, up to the Brooks Range area. And then also what you can see is this really weak band of clouds coming into the southwest interior, low pressure back to the northwest there, west of St. Lawrence Island. Really that whole system not very strong at all. And another band of clouds moving up along and off the coast of the Panhandle. That brought about a third of an inch of precipitation to Sitka today, as you can see that moving up there. Then farther to the south, the next storm system winding up southwest of the Queen Charlotte Islands. And that's the one that's going to be bringing the increased winds and rain late tonight, and possible wind gusts of 60 miles an hour along the western Prince of Wales Island area and into the central areas as well during the day tomorrow. On the chart, you can see I really just drew that in as a trough, that first band of moisture coming in, already pushing inland there. Rainfall amounts have been pretty light so far there, anywhere from 0.02 of an inch at Nome. Calskeg picked up 0.04 of an inch. Really, that's just kind of leftover shower activity there. And St. Paul and Bethel, both 1/100th of an inch, and nothing down to the south. Really, those showers I have in Bristol Bay, really just off the coast there. Dry over the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians. as well as the central and western Aleutians too, with most of the moisture staying to the south of that next system down to the southwest. Still a weak low. It's been off the coast of the northern panhandle or north central coast all week. That spinning that band of moisture up that brought the rainfall to Sitka, which is only 1/3 of an inch in the last 12 hours, and that's tapering off. Still some rain. Petersburg picked up 0.15 of an inch, and it's shut off now over the southern panhandle in response to that next system coming up, kind of the calm before the storm there. But you can also see really more clearing than showers. That's kind of misleading there for south central Alaska. On the chart, there's a lot more sunshine this afternoon than there was shower activity around. And then the clearing increases as you get into the north central interior until you hit the Brooks Range, and it's pretty cloudy from the north slope out to the Arctic coast. And for tonight, weak high pressure keeps it dry with light winds and some clearing up there in the north central interior. Low clouds and fog along the Arctic coast. Isolated showers there over the mid and upper Tanana Valley, mostly over the mountainous terrain. Those will be pretty light. Down into the Alaska Range, maybe the Talkeetnas, possibly the Chugach, but pretty light, nothing too widespread. Otherwise dry, light winds. And that low center tracking slowly eastward closer to St. Lawrence Island. That'll be able to push moisture, a little bit more moisture into the southwest coast for a little bit better chance of somewhat heavier rainfall, but it'll be pretty light with some showers into the Kuskokwim Valley. Showers extend northward to the northwest coast in the Noatak Valley. Periods of light rain, fog, drizzle, IFR flying. Wind's not much of a factor with this system over the Pribilof Islands as well as St. Lawrence Island. And some shower activity over the Aleutians, some of the moisture with the trough to the north, and then that warm front to the south may produce some light rain for Adak and Atka, possibly Fox Islands, but again, quite light. Weak ridging over Kodiak Island, look for light winds and dry conditions there, maybe some clearing. And then some showers with that leftover moisture reach Yakutat, but the wind and rain begin to increase along the south coast, especially Dixon Entrance late tonight and eventually to the Prince of Wales Island area. Should be a pretty dry night, though, over the southeast coast. And then for tomorrow, that system comes slowly northward. And again, the high wind watch out, 35-mile-an-hour winds, gusts possibly 50 to 60 there, Craig, Klawak, and Heidelberg, as well as areas along the coast. Gale warnings, of course, out along the coast, south coast 35 to 40 knots, with rain moderate to heavy at times. Becomes lighter as you head north, really may not push past Juneau with that low center, really isn't going to track too much farther to the north. And so the Lynn Canal Glacier Bay area looks dry, could see some sunshine, light winds, dry conditions, eastern North Gulf Coast. Southwest flow coming over the top of that flat ridge there in the Gulf brings increasing clouds and increasing chances of rain, definitely into the Kuskokwim Valley and eventually into Cook Inlet and the Kenai Peninsula into the Susitna Valley. Showers up to the north and then dry for the eastern North Slope and Arctic coastal areas. Periods of rain, kind of a front now actually making landfall and pushing into the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta there. So periods of rain from the northwest coast down to Kuskokwim Bay, actually all the way down to the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutian areas. And then for Wednesday, a new low develops and moves northward there to the Alaska Peninsula, almost to the Alaska Peninsula, spreading rain up to that area into Kodiak Island. Rain begins to push into Bristol Bay, or continues actually, areas of kind of a cloudy, damp condition here over south central Alaska with some isolated showers in the Copper River Basin as well as up in the interior. North of the Brooks Range, though, dry conditions, low clouds and fog in the Arctic coast. And northerly flow over the Bering Sea, pretty good conditions western Bering, but a lot of low clouds, fog, and drizzle with a couple of troughs dropping southward across the Pribilofs to the central Aleutians. Better conditions for the Panhandle. Looking at lows tonight for the southeast coast, 40s to near 50, upper 30s Copper River Basin, otherwise in the 40s for the remainder of southern Alaska. Highs tomorrow, cooler south central with the increasing a little bit more in the way of clouds. So upper 50s, and that's about it. Lower to mid 50s, Kuskokwim Valley, mid 50s, Bristol Bay, and upper 50s, lower 60s for the Panhandle. Yakutat 62, could see some sunshine there. Then lows back down to near 40, the Copper River Basin, near 50 for Kodiak Island, upper 40s, lower 50s for the Panhandle. And then highs on Wednesday, 60 to 65, southern southeast coast. Again, more sunshine than what you'll see tomorrow. And upper 50s, North Gulf Coast. Remainder of the state, remainder of this portion of the state, mostly in the mid to upper 50s. Up to the north, 30s. Brooks Range to the Arctic coast for your lows, 40s elsewhere. Highs tomorrow, 50s to near 60, especially around the Fairbanks area, the greater Fairbanks area. A little cooler on the Arctic coast, not too bad on the North Slope though. Lows back into the mid to upper 30s, Brooks Range out to the eastern and central Arctic coast, and in the 40s, 40 to 45 for the remainder of interior Alaska. And then highs in the 50s with 40s for the Arctic coast, and out to the southwest, lows mid to upper 40s tonight and lower 40s St. Lawrence Island, highs lower 50s, except upper 50s again AKwx, and mid 50s in the Alaska Peninsula, followed by lows Wednesday morning, lower 40s St. Lawrence Island, lower to mid 40s along the southwest coast and Pribilofs, with upper 40s and near 50s in the Alaska Peninsula, highs in the 50s for the Aleutians and Pribilofs, mid 50s for the Alaska Peninsula, and near 50 along the southwest coast, 45 for Savunga.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
All right, on to flying weather now. Looks like some VFR up over the central, western, north slope and Arctic coast, with IFR on the east side, down across the central Brooks Range, and then the western interior out to the coast. All IFR down to just east of the Pribilofs. All of the Aleutians IFR, but VFR for Chimionat-2, VFR for part of the Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island, marginal for northern Bristol Bay, Fognak Island. Good swath of IFR swinging up into Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula, Prince William Sound area to about Cape St. Elias, and then marginal VFR for the eastern Arctic coast down across the Panhandle. Some VFR over the Copper River Basin, then marginal for the Alaska Range. And for the afternoon, improving, still quite a bit of marginal VFR along the Alaska Range and south central Alaska, North Gulf Coast areas, Prince William Sound, and then some VFR for Kodiak Island, but marginal VFR down toward AKwx and those areas, southern Shelikof Strait, Bristol Bay, much of the western interior, marginal VFR though north of the Alaska Range, in the central interior over to the border and right on up to the North Slope and the Arctic coast, but some IFR clinging to the eastern Beaufort Sea coast as well as the northern Bering Sea. IFR just south side of Nunivak Island to Cape Newnan, Pribilofs down to the Alaska Peninsula, westward to Mchitka Island. And for Wednesday, marginal VFR for the Pribilofs, Atka Island, but IFR for all areas to the east there, right up to the coastline, Seward Peninsula, Norton Sound into Kotzebue, with some IFR in the eastern Arctic coast. Also another zone of IFR now in the Susitna Valley, southward into central northern Cook Inlet, and then across the Kenai Peninsula and Montague Island. But off the coast there, so marginal from the North Gulf Coast, some VFR in the Copper River Basin, and some IFR down over the southern Prince of Wales Island area, about Craig Clock area southward to Heidelberg, otherwise marginal VFR for the Panhandle, and good VFR from AKwx westward to Chimionat-2 in the western Bering Sea, looking pretty good. And for the Wednesday afternoon, eastern interior from the eastern North Slope, Brooks Range, right on down actually to about Tanana, and then east-southeastward across the Copper River Basin, and the Panhandle look pretty good. VFR marginal for southern Alaska, south central Alaska, the western interior, with some IFR in across Togiak Bay into the Kuskokwim Valley, central and southern areas there. Also another zone of IFR through the Bering Strait and along the Arctic coast. And Atuvik and Adigan, both VFR flying tomorrow, looking good there. And for Lake Clark and Merrill, mostly marginal VFR in either approach. Same forecast for rainy, pretty general. For the western Alaska Range, marginal VFR expected. Windy, marginal VFR southern entrance, but VFR through the pass to the north. Isabel, optimistically, go VFR. Maybe a few showers around, but there'll be VFR showers. And Mentasta, VFR. Tanita, VFR. Portage looks marginal. Possible some IFR in the eastern entrance, but right now marginal should cover it. Chilkoot and White, VFR. Freezing levels about 6,000 feet over interior Alaska, including the Panhandle, 6,000 to 8,000 feet over the Aleutians, 4,000 over the central and northwest Bering. And for icing, with that system coming up into off the coast of the southern Panhandle, we've got some considerable moderate rime icing with that. Then this doesn't quite make it into the Lynn Canal Glacier Bay area, and then moisture coming in from the west and southwest. We've got areas of isolated moderate rime icing, much of the western interior pushing into the Alaska Range. down across the Alaska Peninsula, as well as the eastern Aleutian areas above 5,000 to 6,000 feet. And jet stream, westerlies, about 110 knots, clipping the Fox Islands there, and then the stronger jet, that low off the panhandle, keeping the 120 knot winds to the south, and southerlies at about 40 to 60 knots over the western interior. 9,000 feet, showing 35 to 40 knot winds around that low over the northern Bering Sea, diminishing as they blow into the west and southwest interior. 35 to 45 knots there with that low over the panhandle, 60 knots at 3,000 feet. And let me jump back. Otherwise, pretty light winds over the eastern interior under high pressure, light southerlies over the western part of the state. Now, considerable moderate chop, possibly even isolated severe for small aircraft over the southern panhandle. Otherwise, the state pretty well icing free, maybe some light to isolated moderate chop there in the Kuskokwim Valley and over the Kuskokwim Mountains.
Space weather affects technologies. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches to our customers so they can take action.
The Space Weather Prediction Center has had a long-standing relationship with the power industry, so they've been aware that solar storms, the geomagnetic storm piece of that, can affect the operation of their systems and induce extra currents and loads on those systems that can either trip those systems offline or in the worst of cases, cause damage. That relationship goes back for several decades. In fact, a big incident in 1989 where part of Quebec was tripped offline that affected something like 6 million customers for about 9 hours. I think that really raised the awareness in the power industries.
When we get the alert, we watch the grid and start looking for issues. Are we seeing a decline in voltage? Are we seeing equipment failures? And we readjust the system to try to mitigate those problems, try to keep the lights on and keep it from going out.
Averaging about 500, 550 kilometers per second.
If we didn't have this early warning, we wouldn't see it until our sensor saw it. Getting more information quicker and faster before the storm hits, not during the storm, is a big improvement.
In the long term, I think what we need and what we're moving toward, the U.S. as a whole, is better modeling, fully understanding this phenomenon, understanding how it would impact specific systems.
Rather than actually experiencing a storm, we can simulate storms in our software and see what the impact is. We try to get ahead of it. We always plan that if there's an outage, how can we keep the lights on? What's the best process to prevent it?
In the end, 5-10 years from now, there's going to be a whole mix of operational procedures driven by what we do on prediction and warning. And then there also will probably be some level of hardware controls to ensure the reliability of the grid.
Space weather affects technologies. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches to our customers so they can take action.
There's different types of impacts on communication systems, and the HF we call the high frequency, which is that band of communications 3 to 30 megahertz. But it's a very important band of radio communication because it's used widespread. It's used, for example, by the airlines.
HF radio is most commonly used for position reporting when you're going across the ocean airspace, which is devoid of radar. And ATC can't see you, so it's up to you to report your position and your altitude and your speed.
HF works great most of the time, except during a big flare. And during a big flare, that HF communication capability could be gone within a minute or two. So as soon as we see something happening in there or we see a flare, it's one of the first things we do is alert the aviation community, hey, big flare, HF's going to be impacted.
Once we know that there's an event going on, then the aviation industry and the airlines can react to that. They can alter their routes over the poles. They can lower the altitudes that they're flying at, or maybe decide not to fly at all in the interest of the passenger safety.
So that's just one example of how HF is used, but the emergency response community will use it a lot too. It's one of their primary backups.
When you've lost connectivity between certain government agencies, it gives you that long-range coverage to talk from out-of-state to federal governments or from the FEMA locations to the state emergency operations centers.
So if you've got a big hurricane impact in the coastline, whatever big city, we've got the cell towers down and whatnot, we've got emergency communication folks in there. Those folks are very familiar with space weather and how it impacts their systems.
Here in recent years, it was used during Katrina when we had a lot of communications outages down there. It was also used during Hurricane Ike. There was an outage of the telephone circuits with the Texas State Emergency Office, so it was used in both of those situations.
So when we talk about backup, especially for the airlines, typically they'll have SATCOM, so it'll be satellite communication.
The satellite technology that emergency responders use could be GPSs, could be satellite phones, satellite data terminals.
Space weather events can impact SATCOMs. The impact can range from a nuisance to loss of a spacecraft. So we will give them the heads up. If we have space weather events, flares, whatnot, they need to know what's impacting their systems. Situational awareness is key. Time is of essence to these folks. Again, it's life and death.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at the marine forecast, gale warnings with that next storm pulling northward along the south coast of the Panhandle. South-southeast winds increasing 35 to 40 knots, seas up around 15 feet. Small craft advisories there on the central coast for east winds at 25 knots, seas 12 feet. And then north coast, east winds at 15 knots with 5-foot seas. Light variable winds for the northern inner channels at 10 knots and Clarence Strait. Small craft advisories, southeast winds 30 knots with 8-foot seas. Stevens Passage, southeast at 15. And then for the day on Wednesday, there we go. Storm moves through, winds swing around to the northwest at 25 knots. So small craft advisories for the south coast there, seas down to 7 feet. North coast, lighter winds, west 10 to 15 knots. Lincoln Island Glacier Bay, north winds at 15 knots, light northerlies at 10 knots for Stevens Passage, northwest 15 for Clarence Strait. And for Prince William Sound tomorrow, southeast wind at about 10 knots, otherwise light variable winds at 10 knots for the North Gulf Coast and the Barren Islands. Seas running 3 to 4 feet, and that's about it. Kamishak Bay and Cook Inlet, south winds 15 knots, seas 4 to 5 feet. And then for Wednesday, Cook Inlet, southeast winds 15 knots. And for Prince William Sound, southeast at 20 knots with 4-foot seas. Small craft advisories for the North Gulf Coast and the Barren Islands, all looking at a south wind on Wednesday at 30 knots. Kamishak Bay, southeast winds 25 knots, seas 6 feet. Kodiak Island for Tuesday, west-southwest winds 15 knots, seas at about 4 feet. The Alaska Peninsula, southwest winds 20 knots with 6-foot seas. And Bristol Bay, southwest winds 20 knots. For the day Wednesday, small craft advisories now for Bristol Bay for southeast winds at 25 knots. Small craft advisories also for the Alaska Peninsula, west-southwest winds 25 to 30 knots. Gale warnings from Castle Cape to Sitkinak south 40 knots, and east side of Kodiak Island also gale warnings out for south winds at 35 knots. For Unalaska Island, southwest winds 20 knots. Unmak Island, west winds 15 to 20 knots for the day Tuesday. Adak and Atka, not too bad. Westerlies at 15 knots. Western Aleutians, north winds 15 knots. And for Wednesday, north to northwest winds 15 knots for the Western Aleutians. Central Aleutians, north winds 20 to 25 knots. The Fox Islands looking at north to northwest winds 20 to maybe 25 knots. For the southwest coast on Tuesday, southwest winds 15 to 20 knots, seas at about 6 feet. And the Pribilof Islands, west winds at 20 knots with 8-foot seas. Small craft advisories for St. Matthew Island, northwest winds 25 knots, seas 9 feet. St. Lawrence Island, southeast at 15, and the same for Norton Sound. Then on Wednesday, light southerlies at 10 knots for Norton Sound, but north at about 20 knots. St. Lawrence Island, Yukon Delta Coast, seas at about 5 feet. Small craft advisories for the Kuskokwim Delta Coast, north 25 with 6-foot seas. Pribilof, St. Matthew Island, winds will be northwest at 20 knots with 7 to 6-foot seas. Eastern Arctic Coast, east winds 15 to 20 knots for Tuesday. Central Coast, southeast at 20. And then easterlies at 10 knots for the western Arctic coast to Cape Thompson to Wales, northeast at 10. Wales to Cape Thompson on Wednesday, northeast winds 20 knots. Otherwise, the western Arctic coast, northerlies 15 to 20 knots. Central coast, southeast at 10. Eastern Beaufort Sea coast, light east winds at 10 knots. Seas running at about 2 to 3 feet. For tonight, again, look for low clouds and fog up along the Arctic coast. There is some clearing over the eastern central north slope, maybe into the central interior, Koyukuk Valley, possibly. Scattered isolated showers, mainly over the mountainous terrain there north from the Alaska Range to about the Yukon River. Same thing for south central Alaska. Next storm moving up starts to increase the wind and rain along the south coast of the Panhandle late tonight. Otherwise, kind of a light rain shower condition there in the western part of the state to the Bering Sea with that weak low. And kind of develops a front on Tuesday there, pushes it inland, so a little bit better continuous rainfall amounts there from the Alaska Peninsula right on up into the Seward Peninsula area, pushing into the Kuskokwim Valley, and even Cook Inlet, cloudier and wetter, especially in the afternoon. High wind watch out for the southern Panhandle, rain moderate to possibly heavy at times throughout the day, but having trouble getting much past Juneau. And then from Wednesday, that system moves off, and look for diminishing showers, less wind, and increasing sunshine. Next system spreads rain to the Alaska Peninsula. Thank you for joining us.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.